Welcome to the Gritiron Show with Whitney Breaux, a weekly podcast where we celebrate the perseverance, passion, and lifestyle of women on and off the field. The Gritiron Show with Whitney Breaux is a part of the CJC Media Network.
Welcome back to the Gritiron Show. We're excited for another week of amazing women. We're celebrating their breaking the glass ceilings in their respective industries, their perseverance, passion, and lifestyle on and off the field. And I am very excited about our next guest because she's doing the damn thing. If you hear me, down in the city of New Orleans, both covering the Saints and Pelicans for the Advocate, NOLA.com, and Times-Picayune. Let's welcome to the Gritiron, Amie Just. Amie, how are ya?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Quick correction. I don't cover the Pelicans anymore.
No!
I know. I still tweet about them because I love basketball, but we've got a very talented reporter in Christian Clark. Used to cover the Nuggets. Now he covers the Pels for us. And I'm totally okay with not covering them anymore. So I can sit back and watch the dumpster fire and not have to personally deal with it.
I love it. And look, I mean, shucks, the Saints year round are a huge topic to cover and to follow. And earlier during the offseason, I mean, we saw some incredible moves made by the Saints as they're trying to make some changes in the salary cap scenario. And we even saw them release Thomas Morstead, the longtime punter for the team. I know that it certainly appears that you guys have had a close relationship over time. What were your thoughts on the decision by the Saints to move from Thomas on to future endeavors when it comes to special teams?
Yeah, it sucks, right? Because as a journalist, as a reporter, you get, close to these guys, right? And Thomas Morstead is one of those players that has been amazing to work with in my 2 years covering the Saints. He was actually the first Saints player that I met when I joined the beat. So that was, it's hard to see guys that you like have to move on in that way. You thought it was possible, right? But it's never fun to see things like that. But it just goes to show that this is a business at the end of the day, and tough decisions have to be made, especially this year when we don't know, as of this taping, what the salary cap is going to be for the upcoming year, but the Saints are just in a really tough spot with having to be way over the cap based on some moves that they've made, and then having the cap be lower than expected. Tough moves have to be made, and this was one of them.
Certainly a disappointing probably decision, like you said, from a personal perspective, whenever we think about the heart, but whenever you connect it to the head, understanding kind of the decisions that the Saints are having to make this offseason as they prepare for, what's next for the franchise. It's a change, and it's a time of change. And one of my favorite books by Dr. Henry Cloud, Necessary Endings, was one of the things that came to mind whenever I saw the move that the Saints made as it related to Mr. Morstead. But we certainly wish him well. Who Dat Nation will always be a fan of Thomas Morstead, and as he moves on to his future endeavors. But Amie, we're excited, like I said, to have you on the Gritiron Show, where we're celebrating women who are doing amazing things in their respective fields. And you've been now in the sports journalism world for a while. I mean, I'd love to know a little bit more about, how did you get into this? I mean, was this always a passion or a dream for you in order to cover sports? And I mean, what was kind of your first step into sports journalism?
Yeah, so I'm from Nebraska originally, and football is everything there, college football, right? Because there's no NFL team within the state. So it is all Nebraska football all the time. And Louisiana can relate to that a little bit because it's not like this is a two major school state like Alabama, Mississippi, etc. So you have what you have with Nebraska football. So that's, the world revolves around Nebraska football. That's it. You've got football season, and then That's it. Like, there's nothing else. That's all you look forward to all year long. Especially when they, used to be good. They're not good anymore. So that's, other people have found, other things to do. Like my mom now cares much more about Nebraska volleyball than she does football. Cause there's actually signs of life within that program.
Shout out to Cornhuskers volleyball.
But yeah, they're really good. But, so when I was growing up, I grew up in rural Nebraska, middle of nowhere. And my parents placed a large emphasis on news literacy and knowing what's going on in the world. Even though we lived in a very rural area, my parents had subscriptions to 4 different newspapers, not always at the same time, but it's really important to read the news and watch, local news and national news and just be a good citizen and knowing what's going on around you. Well, with Nebraska being so sports dominant and my parents always having newspapers around, I just put the two together. I always liked to write and I love sports. And so it was a natural thing for me to want to do. So, when you're little and you're like, my name's Sarah and I'm 7 and my favorite color is orange and my cat is making noises. I'm sorry. But, my favorite color is orange and I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. Like, I would write that I wanted to be like a sports writer or sports broadcaster as early as about 2nd grade. Wow. So, so I don't have this like one eureka moment. But yeah, it's always been on my mind and I've never really looked back. I told my mom when I was in 8th grade that I wanted to go to the University of Kansas to study journalism. And she's like, Kansas, you've never even been to Kansas. And that's what I ended up doing. I just had a plan and I stuck with it. And I know that's really weird. But I've always known what I wanted to do. And the only other thing I ever pictured myself being was, when I'm like 7 and watching The Little Mermaid and, wanting to be a mermaid, but that's not super realistic.
I mean, so. Ariel kind of gave all of us a little something to aspire to in The Little Mermaid. There's no doubt about that. And even from a young age, it sounds like you were really attracted to sports. I mean, what drew you to sports in general? I mean, whether it was football or basketball, I mean, what do you think made it special that was like, man, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life? Yeah,
well, I was always in sports. Right. So my mom put me in, the little kids soccer and basketball and, volleyball and all that stuff. And then I was like 7. So my mom, when I was younger, she was a water aerobics instructor and she would go to teach her class right as the swim team would be getting out of the pool. And she got to know the coaches and some of the swimmers pretty well. And she mentioned that, I liked the water. And so she put me in swim team. And I kept swimming until hyper competitively until I was about 14. And then had a career-ending shoulder injury. But I still swim recreationally. I still do. When I get the chance. So yeah, that's part of that. And then I did track for about 12 years too. Super competitively, made it to nationals for a couple different things when I was in middle school. So that love of sports has always been there. I've played just about everything under the sun except for lacrosse. Lacrosse, believe it or not a big thing in Nebraska. Really? No, it's more of a East Coast thing. Yeah, but no, I didn't even know lacrosse existed until I was like in high school. So,
well, it's certainly making its strides as it's trying to attract more kids to the game. I've seen a couple of high schools here locally in Baton Rouge that are starting to kick up some lacrosse teams. But it's something that we're all trying to probably learn a little bit more about. Like you said, the coast folks certainly know a little bit more about it. But it sounds like, Amie, I mean, you were you have always been a competitive person, and you've always strived to be the best. I mean, where does that come from out of you? Like as a woman, as you're in sports journalism, trying to, claw and fight your way to being the best in your respective industry. I mean, where do you think that you find that, as we call it, grit? Where does it come from?
I genuinely have no idea. I've been competitive forever. Like my whole life. I've always wanted to win. I've always wanted to, be the best. Like in 8th grade, I got second at the spelling bee, and I was pissed. I was so pissed. And I'm just like, what is, like, second is still good, but no, it wasn't good enough. I don't know where it comes from. My dad never really did sports. He played a little basketball, but that was really about it. And my mom, she didn't get the opportunity to play a lot of sports in high school because back then, like, they didn't have sports for girls until her senior year of high school. So, like, that's still really recent, right? Like, right. It's wild that I, a millennial, am 1 degree removed from somebody who wasn't allowed to play high school sports for most of her time because you didn't do that. So, yeah, that's wild when you think about it in that way. But yeah, I just have always demanded excellence from myself. I always wanted the best grades. I don't know where it comes from, but it's been something that's been a part of me my whole life.
Well, it sounds like it's ingrained in you. It's almost innate. Like you said, you may not be able to put your finger on it, but no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're covering, no matter what it is, you're looking to be the best. And that's something that we try to celebrate here at the Gritiron Show, which is each and every day we want to get 1% better. And, I'm curious, as you think about, your journey as a woman in sports broadcasting or in sports journalism, I mean, how have you seen the world of sports change in your time, especially as it relates to the role that women are now playing, not only from coaches being Super Bowl winners, we've got women that are referees in Super Bowls. I mean, we've got women scoring in Power 5 football games. I mean, not just in football, but across the sports spectrum. What have you found that has, really led you to believe that, hey, there's a change coming as it relates to the role that women are playing in sports today?
Well, I mean, when the hurdle to clear is laying on the floor, there's a lot of potential for growth, right?
Yeah.
Like I just said, my mom wasn't allowed to play high school sanctioned sports until she was a senior in high school. So, like, it hasn't been a long time where women were allowed to be in these areas, right? Like, there are still women sports writers who early in their career weren't allowed in locker rooms or weren't allowed in clubhouses and had to sue to get that, right? Like, that's not something that's a foreign concept. That happened not too terribly long ago. Right. So when you're seeing more opportunities for women in sports, it's a heartwarming thing, but you can't forget just how recently we were actively barred from participating in these things. Wow. And the culture that surrounds that never really went away. You have more accepting people now, but it's still an imbalance, right? Where there are people around still working in these industries that actively work to keep things that way.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of that. Like, there are a lot of really great people out there who want to help you, but also know that the structure was that way because they wanted it to be that way.
Yeah. And I know recently you had the opportunity to participate in the NFL's Careers for Women Forum. I mean, that's a completely new platform over the last couple of years, but really geared towards helping women, not only from a coaching perspective, but from an executive level, to gain more access and insight into at least the world of the NFL. I mean, what were some of the key takeaways that you had, and how did you feel about the NFL providing that type of forum over the next couple of years for women, and certainly minority women as well?
Yeah, it's a really good start, right? But it's not the goal. Like, we, in an equitable society, we wouldn't need this.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a step forward. It's very similar with, they've got something similar for Black coaches. In an equitable society, you wouldn't need that.
The Rooney Rule, as far as interviewing a certain coaches. Yeah.
Exactly. So community is a good thing that comes from that. I've met a lot of women through doing things like that. And you learn a lot, right? Because everybody's got a ton of different perspectives, but it also reveals your blind spots.
Sure.
So, for example, the Superdome's press box has a single stall restroom for women. They've got 2 full-fledged bathrooms for men, but 1 single stall for women. And when I brought that up to somebody, they were like, "Wait, what? Like, how is that possible? Like, we didn't even know that was a thing." It's like, yeah, like if it doesn't affect you, you don't realize it.
But that's the power of diversity, right? Like, that's the whole point. Like, if we don't have diverse perspectives pulled up to the boardroom table, then, like you said, blind spots. Folks don't even think about it or don't know.
Yeah, because if it doesn't affect you, why would you think about it?
Yeah. And no, and I think that's such an important topic for us to discuss on this platform, because that's one of the reasons why the Gritiron Show exists, is to open the door for conversation, talk about the things that maybe aren't always discussed in some of the rooms where women may not be present, or certainly even minorities might not be present. But what are those things that may be blind spots? Because that's the power of not only diversity, but also having an inclusive platform as well. And so we're hoping to bring that to the forefront in the conversations that we're having with women like yourself, who are doing, like I said, doing the damn thing in their respective industries. But I mean, Amie, you've been doing this now for a while. Like you said, you're a millennial. I'm a millennial myself. And we've seen a lot happen over the last couple of, years in sports. Has there been a favorite story or, report that you've put out that means a lot to you, that you carry with you to this day, that you say, you know what, this is what I say is like one of my gold star achievements that I've covered?
Yeah, so I've got 2.
Okay.
And I'll start with the most recent one. So last summer, Demario Davis's youngest daughter, Carly Faith, was diagnosed with a really rare cancer called retinoblastoma. So it affects very few children annually, and it's really hard to detect. One, because doctors don't see it. Like, it's really rare for a primary doctor to have a child under their care that has this condition. But 2, like, you have to know what you're looking for. So a tumor was growing in her eye. And after they finally discovered it, but she had to lose her eye because of it. And she was 9-10 months old when she had the procedure to remove her eye. She's cancer-free now. She's
Amen.
fine. But it took a while for that testing to be confirmed. So in that case, with that particular type of cancer, it can be genetic, but it can also just be a really fluky thing. And if it's genetic, that would mean that she would have to undergo monthly checkups until her 5th birthday to make sure it didn't come back in her other eye. But through testing, it just it was a weird thing that happened and she's okay and her siblings aren't at risk and all of that stuff. It was just a weird deal that Carly Faith had to deal with. But yeah, so I was cooking dinner when I got an email from his marketing person and said that they wanted to talk to me about this. I had no idea.
Wow.
Right? Like, this was during the season when they came to me and wanted to talk about it. So they had kept it pretty under wraps for a while, and they weren't ready to talk about it until they got some more answers. But yeah, so them coming to me to tell that story, I cried a lot. Because you're human, right? And you're writing about this baby. She's a baby that lost her eye due to cancer. And it's just, it's, you know, if you're human, you get attached to that.
Yeah.
So writing that story, it was really hard, right? But that's what I do this job for.
Yeah.
Is to write stories that are meaningful to people. And it meant a lot to me that DeMario and his family wanted to talk to me about it, right? They didn't go to ESPN or TMZ or Sports Illustrated for the story. They wanted me to write it. So that's a lot of pressure. But
it's a testament to who they see in you and the faith and trust. Yeah.
Yeah. And exactly. But yeah, lots of pressure to get it right. But yeah, I'm really proud of that story. It took a lot of emotional labor to write it too, but I'm proud of that one. And then the other one was a story that I wrote when I was a high schools reporter in Montana. So my coverage area, I had 42 high schools that me and the rest of the people were responsible for. It was a team of 3 sports people. And during basketball season, we had one of the best basketball teams in the state was in our coverage area. And they were, a group of kids that lived on the Flathead Native American Reservation.
Oh.
And their rival school, also on the reservation, right before postseason basketball, the starting point guard of the rival team committed suicide.
Oh.
And that team, the good team, they dedicated the rest of their season to suicide awareness and suicide prevention, especially with a hyper focus on the reservation, but not, they're focusing on the issue as a whole, right? And I was talking to, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids about suicide. And when the first time that they heard about that and, how many people they've known that have chosen that route to put an end to their lives. And it was really moving. I'll never forget. I was sitting on top of my Jeep with the starting point guard of the team that was dedicating their run to their friend and the suicide awareness campaign. And he's just like, yeah, like it's been a part of our lives forever. And it's just something that we've been aware of for a very long time. And because that's just what happens up here. So not only are there less resources for those type of things, Montana has the highest rate of suicide per capita in the country.
Wow.
And Native Americans up there represent a very large portion of that. So it was hard to write that story. But after I wrote that story, the senator for one of the senators for the state of Montana helped them secure a $50,000 grant for mental health services.
Yes.
So like that was the first time that my work ever made me feel like I like made a difference. Like I was letting those kids tell their stories, right? I was just giving them an outlet to do so. But one of their senators read it and felt that it needed immediate attention. And it was amazing. Their story has now been told in the New York Times and on NBA TV. And it's been all over the place. And it's this teeny tiny little town on an Indian reservation in Montana. And it's really cool that their story is out there and that they were willing to even do this in the first place. Because they're 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids.
And the courage that they had to talk about it.
And it's such a hard conversation. Like I'm having a hard time talking about it right now, and I'm a grown adult.
Right.
So yeah. So those are the two stories that stick with me. There are a couple more, but those are the two that stick with me the most.
Well, those are two that certainly resonate with us here at the Gritiron Show. Myself, I call myself a breast cancer thriver because I'm not yet a survivor. I'm still in active treatment and still going through the thick of things. But I mean, whenever to know what I've been through in my cancer journey and to even fathom what that experience would be like for a child. And, certainly it's a different type of cancer, but there's nothing like that experience. And so for you to have the opportunity to tell that story on behalf of the Davis family, and then myself as a, Native American as well, I mean, it is something that's very prevalent in the Native American culture and indigenous people population. That isn't told, and the power of your pen, if you will, to not only tell their story, but then for that to lead to action that is meaningful and change. I mean, that's what that's what we're looking to celebrate on the Gritiron Show is women who are making things happen, even sometimes when we don't necessarily intend for it to lead to, funding and for resources that are being provided to a community of people that need it. So thank you for what you're doing each and every day, not only to tell those stories that you've told in the past, but I'm sure the future ones that are still yet to come, and the impact that it will have. On the Gritiron Show, one of the things that we ask every guest, Amie, is we're trying to build a community, to not only inspire women, but to inspire men as well of women that have grit. So I have to ask you, if you think about the women that you admire, that you see persevere and that push through obstacles and boundaries, does anyone come to mind that you'd want to share with our listeners?
Oh man, there are so many. There are so many. So one of my favorite writers is Miriam Fader. The work that she does, writing feature stories about anything and everything in sports. She's got a book coming out on Giannis here sometime this summer, I believe. And then Jordan Rodriguez, she used to cover the Panthers for the Charlotte Observer and the Athletic, but now she covers the Rams for the Athletic. I just love everything that she does. She's just a super great person too. So yeah, those two are the two that I look up to the most personally.
Well, we certainly want our folks who listen to the Gritiron Show to check them out, learn more about their story. But Amie, we certainly appreciate your time. And again, for you for saying yes to coming on the Gritiron Show and sharing your story. We're so excited that we're providing this platform to celebrate women. I mean, that's what we're all about. And we're hoping to, talk to more and more often and talk about their stories and celebrate them with our listeners. So thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time today. Amie Just with the Advocate, NOLA.com, and Times-Picayune New Orleans Saints sports reporter. Amie, thanks so much for joining us on the Gritiron Show. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.